Stephen what?
Said Mom's brother Sam died last night.
Whose brother?
My mom's brother.
Sam Browner.
Oh, is that right? I hate to hear that. I like the Rudders.
I love Sam.
Oh, yeah. All right, folks, welcome to the Stony Creek Church of Christ. Those of you who are visiting with us, good to have the Sextons with us from Galax, Virginia. I used to preach in Galax, and it's always good to see people from Galax. As I travel, they've attended meetings that I've preached, and I appreciate them so very much. Now, if you've not met Ryan and Mary, do it. If you've already introduced yourself to them, do it again. You know why? They got all these names to remember. You've only got two, Ryan and Mary. Eddie can do that. He can remember two. So, sure enough, be sure to meet them. We appreciate them so very much. All right, what are the purposes of the book of Daniel? To show that God rules in the affairs of men. We're going to see that in chapter 7. To show the future of God's people. We're going to see that in chapter 7. To show that we must be dedicated to God. That's always true. It is not magnified in chapter 7 as it is in 3, 6, and 1. Now, we got a problem as we start chapter 7. And that is that it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head. Well, now, wait a minute. That's the first year of Belshazzar, but Belshazzar died in Daniel 5. So that creates a problem. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. So we know that the books, or the chapters, are not in chronological order. So here's the order in which the chapters should fall. 1, 2, 3, then 7 and 8, since both of them are going to be during the reign of Belshazzar, but Belshazzar dies in chapter 5, so we got to move chapter 5 back. Then we got 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, why is it that chapters 7 through 12 appear where they do and maybe not in chronological order? Well, there's various reasons. One of them, these are primarily the dreams of Daniel in 7 through 12. In 1 through 6, Daniel's doing the interpretation of dreams and is showing the lifestyle of 4 young men. That's what we have. Now, Daniel 7 and Daniel 2 are alike. Keep that in mind. So as you study Daniel 2 and then you go to Daniel 7, you're going to see parallel events. So Daniel 7:2 says, Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. Now, the 4 winds of heaven is showing the providential raising up of kingdoms as God sees fit. And then the great sea from which the kingdoms arise is simply the sea of people. We'll see that. Notice, by the way, when you read Revelation, chapters 13 and 17 are alike. As a matter of fact, when you read the book of Revelation, and I'm hoping to get to teach that before long, I want you to notice that you see the church under persecution, first 12 chapters. But you don't even find out who the enemy is till you come to chapter 13. That's amazing. And then in chapter 17, it clears it up even more who the enemy is. And I stood upon the sand of the sea. Notice, John is standing upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now, this beast is the enemy that's going to fight God's people. From whence did it come? The sea. Well, what are the seas? What are the waters? Notice in Revelation 17:15, and he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, that's the great Babylon, or, in this case, Rome, are peoples, multitudes, and nations, and tongues. Now, we're going to see a little later in the book of Daniel, it's going to say that these kingdoms arose from the earth. Well, that's where people are, and the sea of people. Notice Daniel 7:3 is going to be the same as the head of gold in Daniel 2. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Until it tried to make it on its own, and it couldn't make it on its own because God had a plan that another kingdom should arise. And I want you to notice that's the Medo-Persian kingdom, the same as the silver in that great image in Daniel 2. In Daniel 7:5, and behold another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side. Now, anytime you're talking about the Medo-Persian kingdom in the book of Daniel, one side will always outdo the other, because the Persian side was stronger than the Medo side. So it says it raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. Now, I don't know the significance of the 3 ribs, except it pushed every direction and devoured flesh in every direction except the east. And that may be the significance of it. I'm not sure. Whoops, I think I skipped one. Now, this one is the same as the brass, and this is the Grecian kingdom. Now, we don't know these are kingdoms yet. You're taking my word for it. But when we get to the interpretation, you're going to see we're talking about kings and kingdoms. Okay? So you don't have to take my word for it. So it says in verse 6, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. Now, I'm convinced that simply shows the significance of how fast the Grecian Empire moved Alexander the Great, how fast he conquered the world. Now, in chapter 8, you're going to see a ram, and that represents the Medo-Persian with 1 horn higher than the other. Always when you deal with the Medo-Persian Empire, that's what's going to be the case. Then you have a he-goat with a big horn, and that horn represents the first king. And flying through the air where it doesn't even touch the ground and destroys the ram. So that we'll see in chapter 8 when we get there. So after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. the beast had also 4 heads. It's amazing how accurate this is. Do you know when Alexander the Great died, his 4 generals took the empire? They divided it up. And dominion was given to it. We'll see that in chapter 8, Lord willing. Now, in the next empire, the Roman Empire, and by the way, the only empire that's not mentioned by name in the book of Daniel. But we know what it is because it followed the Third World Empire. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, can you imagine Daniel trying to figure out what all this meant? See, I just drew a head up there with 10 horns on it. That's not a great drawing. I never claimed to be an artist. Okay? Well, who are they? Now, again, it's amazing how accurate Daniel is. He doesn't miss it. Number one, these are the Caesars that ruled the Roman Empire. We got Augustus. Now, Augustus was in power when Jesus was born. We got Tiberius. He was in power when Jesus was crucified and the church was established. Caligula. He was in power as the church grew. Claudius. Same thing. Nero. He's the one they believe killed the Apostle Paul. Then you got Galba, Otto, and Vitellius. These 3 were generals that tried to become Caesars but never made it. Then you got Vespasian. Vespasian was in power when Jerusalem was destroyed. And Titus, his son, was the general that led the forces. Then you got Titus, who is the son of Vespasian. Then Domitian, who is the son of Vespasian. Domitian tried to get rid of Galba, Otto, and Vitellius so that he could eventually become the emperor, and he did. And he passed himself off as a god and demanded people worship him. And if Christians wouldn't do that, he persecuted them immensely. We'll see that when we study the book of Revelation. Notice verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, and that will be Domitian, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things, because he declared himself to be deity. Now, on this chart, in Daniel 7, you got Daniel looking forward. He sees a lion, he sees a bear, he sees a leopard, and an indescribable beast. Well, we know that the lion is Babylon, the bear, Medo-Persia, the leopard, the Grecian Empire, and the indescribable beast is Rome. Now, in the book of John, you got John looking backwards. And he is in the Roman Empire, so he speaks of the leopard, the bear, and the lion. Both of them got it exactly right. Now, in verse 9, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool, His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. So these thrones were cast down, these governments. And God here is demonstrated to be in charge of everything. They never overpower him, not at all. And it says a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands of thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set and the books were opened. Time for these empires to be judged. Boy, you think about how many servants Jehovah God has. And now they are going to stand in the face of the God of this universe. They don't have a chance. Not a chance. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain. That beast is slain. There goes Rome. And his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. See, you can't fight God. You can try, but it's not going to work. As concerning the rest of the beast, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. Now, all that says is, if an empire is destroyed, its influence lives on for a while. Just like because Alexander the Great and the Grecian Empire was destroyed, doesn't mean that people quit speaking Greek. It doesn't mean that at all. So their influence went on. And the synagogues continued to stay up that were established during the Babylonian captivity. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Now I want you to look at God on the throne, the drawing. That's the Ancient of Days. He's always been. Never had a starting point. But now I want you to notice how the Son gets his kingdom. He comes from the earth to the Ancient of Days. See that? From the earth. Premillennialism has got him leaving the Ancient of Days, coming to the earth to set up a kingdom. They got it backwards. It says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. Christ had to leave the earth, ascend to heaven, to become King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and to be at the right-hand side of his Father. And there was given unto him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. When he ascended back into heaven and received his kingdom, it was a kingdom that could not be destroyed, parallel to Daniel 2:44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. That's God's kingdom that he promised to establish in Daniel 2:44. And even though 4 world empires came and went, they could not stop what was promised in Daniel 2:44. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of the things. Now we're going to get the interpretation, what all of it meant. And so notice, these great beasts, which are four kings. Now we're finding out their kings, their kingdoms, which shall arise out of the earth. Now originally it was out of the sea, but it simply means out of the people, from the people. All right? But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. You're part of that. You're part of this vision. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. That's you, me. That's everybody since the day of Pentecost. In Acts 1:8, but ye shall receive power after the Holy Ghost has come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and in Samaria, now watch it, and unto the uttermost part of the earth. It got here to you and me. We're part of that. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast. See, one thing Daniel wanted to know, what does the future hold for my people? Who in the world is the fourth beast? That dreadful beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth, that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. Boy, that's what you're going to see in the book of Revelation. And it's going to be so bad that it's going to look like the saints have lost. Well, I start the study of the book of Revelation usually with chapter 11 and show how bad it is. But the saints are going to be victorious until the Ancient of Days came, and that's in judgment. And judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. They won the victory. Thus, he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom. Notice we're talking about kingdoms. Thus, he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. This is going to be an awesome beast. Then in Daniel 2:45, as we parallel these, notice what happens. For as much as thou sawest the stone was cut out of the mountain with thy hands, and it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof is certain. So that stone, made without hands, took care of those 4 world empires. The Christ in his kingdom was victorious. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings. Notice 10 kings within that kingdom. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And another shall rise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. Now we know he's going to do 3 kings in. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until times, and the dividing of time. Now, if you study the book of Revelation, that's exactly the amount of time they were under persecution in the book of Revelation. That's no accident. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and destroy it unto the end of the Roman Empire. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Daniel, if you look all the way down, the people that are Jews should become Christians, and they're going to be under tremendous fire, but they're going to win. So whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom? All dominions shall serve and obey him. In Mark 9:1, we have those who claim, lo and behold, the kingdom is not here. Jesus said this, verily I say unto you, that there be some of them that stand here, which shall not taste of death till they have seen the kingdom of God come with power. See, the kingdom came in the lifetime of some of those people. And the denominational preachers will run to the book of Revelation to try to prove that the kingdom is yet future. But in Revelation 1:9, I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom. He was in the kingdom. So, in verse 28, hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me. But I kept the matter in my heart. Daniel said, man, this is a lot to take in. And this bothered me. We're part of Daniel's dream. When we're born again, we're added to that everlasting kingdom which cannot be destroyed. All right. Questions, comments, observations from anybody?
Can you kind of, in your words, say again, in the beginning of Daniel, you were talking about it, 7, what it says for us. You kind of wrapped it up and then you went through everything. Can you put it in your words again? Just want to hear how you say it.
All right, say that again.
How you began the class of what Daniel 7, how it pertains to us.
Okay, how it pertains to us.
Yeah, what did you say about that? And I want to hear how you
Great Scott, Howard. You expect me, 76 years of age, to go back and remember what I said?
Eddie put me up to this.
Okay.
Eddie.
Okay. All right. All I'm saying is that Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 promotes and teaches there's coming an everlasting kingdom. That kingdom is the church. And I'm saying it pertains to you, Howard, and me, in that we are members now of that everlasting kingdom. That's how it pertains to you. That's how it pertains to me. Now, did I make that muddier?
No, that's good. I like how you said it. I just wanted to hear you say it again.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure those were the same words.
Well, I can't remember either. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. But that's what I was saying, whether I made it clear or I didn't make it clear. All right. All right. Anything else from anybody? Eddie. Yes. Exactly. And those four winds of heaven that was blowing at the first of the chapter is his providential working to make all of it happen. Like you say, he knew it. He knew that stone was going to be cut out without hands. And he knew those four world empires were going to collapse. And he knew his empire would never collapse. Never. So you're exactly right. This was in the eternal purpose and mind of God. Ephesians 3, 10 and 11 says the church was in the eternal purpose and mind of God. The church is the kingdom. So that's the case. Anybody else? Got a question or a comment? Now, I want you to really study chapter 8. Oh, I want you to, of course, I've told you, and I think the chapter tells you, who the ram is, who the he-goat is, and who the people are that take the kingdom back then, and if it's consistent with history. There's people that's become believers simply because they've read the book of Daniel and they have seen how accurate the book is historically. And it is so accurate. Some so-called scholars say it had to be written after the fact. You can't get it that right, that accurate, without you seeing that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened, and I'll write that down. But that's not the case. God wrote it down before it happened. Like Eddie said, it was in the eternal purpose or the eternal mind of God Almighty. All right, anything else before we quit? Thank you much for your kind attention.